Good afternoon, everyone. Wasn't that amazing? Wasn't that amazing? My name is Claire Speed, and I'm delighted to be here this afternoon on behalf of the Glenn Gould Foundation to introduce the next Promise of Music Forum called Preserving Culture, Preventing Erasure, a perfect segue to Dr. Sarmast's presentation. How many of you heard the Afghanistan National Institute for Music orchestra perform last night at the Aga Khan Museum? What I was struck by so much was the integration of the instruments from Afghanistan with orchestral instruments that so many of us are familiar with. It was a beautiful blending of cultures. Music is an essential thread that runs through cultures. It's part of who people are and how they understand themselves. When families and populations are uprooted through war, climate impacts, and other traumatic events, they become alienated from their cultures and their traditions. Our panelists today discuss the vital role music and music education can play in preserving culture and preventing its erasure. The Glenn Gould Foundation is honored to have two award-winning educators, Dr. Summer Forrester, Associate Professor of Music Education at the University of Toronto, and Ron Davis Alvarez, founder and artistic director of the Dream Orchestra based in Gothenburg, Sweden, who will lead this discussion along with Dr. Ahmed Sarmast. We're also honored to have Dr. Richard Marcella as the host and moderator of today's session. Dr. Marcella is the Executive Director of Community Music Schools of Toronto, a school that provides free after-school music lessons to over 700 students in the Regent Park and Jane and Finch areas of Toronto. Richard completed a PhD in music education at the University of Toronto in 2021 and has worked at the community level as founder and programmer of the Brampton Indie Arts Festival and as director of the Parade of Noises, also in Brampton, an outdoor annual event for young students who use recycled materials to make and perform on homemade musical instruments. Please welcome Dr. Richard Marcella and our panelists, Dr. Ahmed Sarmast, Dr. Summer Forrester, and Ron Davis Alvarez.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. I hope you're having fun. You're having a nice time? My name is Richard Marcella, and thank you, Claire, for the wonderful introduction. Very moved and inspired by Dr. Sarmast's discussion earlier in his presentation. So we're gonna spend the next hour or so. We'll leave time for questions and comments, of course. The role music education plays in preserving or recovering cultural traditions. I like this idea of regaining rootedness. That was in the description of this talk, in the music and music education that we make. And we are truly honored. What a panel here that we have in front of us. A lot of lived experience, and we want to make the most of our time together and dig deep and have a very meaningful and respectful conversation together. So I'm going to begin. I've got a few questions for you. Not all of you need to answer it, each question. We want to make the most of our time. But if you are feeling inspired, go for it. Don't hold back. Okay, so my first question is basically, how would you define cultural preservation in the context of music education? In your experience? That goes for any of you. Oh, this is a very Canadian panel. I'll have to go for it. Summer Forrester,
I've been nominated by my colleagues. Thank you very much to the Gould Foundation for the opportunity to be here today. In my work, I come here today as a professor of music education, but more specifically, recently I've done a great deal of work with the Edward Said Conservatory in Palestine, and a lot of my personal research has focused on the experiences of women musicians who are Palestinian living in the West Bank. And so when I think about the question, I think about it certainly from those different vantage points, and more specifically in the case of the women who I've researched over the last decade in Palestine and the students who I've worked with. So much of the preservation of culture through music simply has to do with having the opportunity to gather and to create and to participate in something that is their own and that is joyful and that is purposeful and that allows them to self-identify and actualize on their terms.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you very much. I would like to share from the, I'm a music teacher, so from the teacher's perspective, the preservation of the music, of the tradition of the students is going with the protection of the identity. How we really protect their identity, their voices. I have the opportunity to be teaching for Afghan students, from Ukrainians, and from Inuit culture. And every time, the first things that I saw is what repertoire are we using, in what ways. We recently did a project called Storytelling, and it was especially to teach in the orchestra, not only to play the instruments, but also to dance, to make theater about their own culture. Because the preservations come when you give access to the voice, to everybody are able to share their own voice. And persons who work with migrants or refugees, we always have the privilege of the knowledge and the culture that they bring to your classroom. Every time I see students coming from different countries, of course, it's incredible, it's terrible to see the sadness of the escaping from the countries where they are, but I always see in them a richness of culture that they bring to a place. So for me, the preservation, it's actually really important in the hands of the people who make curriculums, the people who are in front of the classroom or the organizations are working, because it's so much beauty coming with culture that you have to protect.
I know you will all be able to answer this, but try to put it in words, because it's almost impossible for me to think of. But why is music so good at this connection between us, between cultures? Why is music such a good tool, do you think, in your experiences? Very polite panel here.
Please go.
Go for it, Dr. Sarmas.
I briefly also, in my previous discussion, I touched this issue, the importance of music, not only, first I would like to comment that, yes, for us, musical preservation is a way of not only to preserve our identity, but also to preserve a culture for future generation, which is currently facing erasure in Afghanistan. It was in the 20th century, in the last quarter of the 20th century, Afghanistan was the only country where twice a systematic attempt has been taken place to erase the musical tradition of Afghanistan and the musical culture from the memory of Afghanistan. It was, in a way, disrespect for the identity of Afghanistan. So therefore, for us, preservation today, and in the past it was reviving after those erasure, but now preservation is a significant element to preserving music for the future generation of Afghanistan, and so it's part of the a rich musical tradition of not only Afghanistan, but of the region. But when it comes to the importance of music, I'm a strong believer in the power and the ability of music. For me, music is not just entertainment. For me...
So you said it's not just entertainment.
It's not just entertainment.
Yes, okay,
it's much more than just an entertainment. In my case, in Afghanistan, sure, music is a source of healing. So the country was in war for many, many years. There's no family who does not have a story or who did not lose someone in this almost 50 years of war. So music is a source of healing for my community, for Afghanistan, but also music is a source of unity. Music has the ability, it's a language, it's understood by everyone. You don't have to create something. So, and that's why music is erase boundaries, and that's why in Afghanistan for us music was also a source of connecting communities, uniting the different people, because music has this ability.
Well, I think the video that we all got to see in your talk before was, the lyrics were just very moving in a sense that it really brought together. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yes, if I want to say a few words about this video. No one knows who is the composer of this song. No one knows who is the poet of the text of this song. The song has been released by two women in the first hours when the girls were deprived university education. Two women fully covered, no one could see their faces. Without no musical instruments, they performed this song and released it on the social media. It came across my attention. I said, okay, we should amplify their voices. How we can amplify those voices and make it accessible and understood by the rest of Afghan community and by the rest of the world. So we took this music, we arranged it, we performed it, we video recorded with the fact what's happened. In this video, you can see how many days women were without job, how many days the women were not able to go to school, how many ways the women were not able to go to the nature. So it's a kind of, we just took an unknown voice and amplified it.
Can we touch on this concept of amplifying voices through the work that you do, Summer? If we could put it to you.
Sure, and also to connect the previous question, and I think in the simplest of terms, when I think of what is it about music, music is connected to our humanity, and it's a humanistic act to make music, to listen to music, to perform music, to collaborate. And so I think when you think about that baseline, really powerful baseline construct, that then to zoom out and to think about the places that we're describing and the populations who we're describing, that it becomes even more powerful. And in the space of, we mentioned connection, and I think it's easy for us to take it for granted, the difficulties that occur, in some cases, the impossibility of connection, and the obstacles that are placed in front of populations just to even gather. And so to gather and share in community, and then to perform in a way that speaks to your own voice, is really powerful. And again, I go back to that rootedness in humanity. One of a profound musician who I've met, her name is Rima Tarzi, and she's in her 90s. She is a concert pianist and the founder of the Edward Said Conservatory, and a prolific composer. And she's written music throughout the last 77 years in Palestine. And she made a comment to me, and she said that every time there was acts of violence, war, etc., that she went to the piano and just had an outpouring. And again, I come back to that intuitively and instinctively humanistic act, and a compulsion music is cathartic, it's healing. And she commented that when narratives are rewritten by by those in power, that music can, in many ways, be the only act of preservation that documents the voice of the people at that time and in that moment. And so I think that really connects to a lot of what we were, to your point.
Definitely. I think if you all, for a moment, think what connects you to some good memories of some moments in your life, it will always come music and food. It is true. When you, I'm from Venezuela, and I live now in Sweden. When I want to be close to my home, I eat the food that is from my home. I dance because I hear the music from my home. And I feel the same when I have kids traveling with me to South America, and they are from north of Greenland. And then you see if they are missing something, is connecting to their roots and their internal part. And I think it's because our brain, and it's scientifically known, just move to our memory when we have this feeling of tasting something that is connecting to who you are.
Can you expand a little bit on, you were telling us backstage how you connected with Dr. Sarmast, how you were inspired to, I found that very interesting, and the idea of connecting different musical cultures and how, you're one individual, but it seems like you really made that effort to pull different communities and musical cultures together.
I believe in role models very much. And I have to say, you're a big inspiration and role model. I was mentioned just backstage. I have many people that I like it, but there are a few people that is kind of role model in life. One is Maestro José Antonio Abreu, who created El Sistema. Anne Andresen, who worked with Inuit culture in Greenland, and Dr. Sarmast. I've been following his work for longer, and I knew it when you was planning to get the Polar Prize in Sweden. So I have a student from Afghanistan, and I contact the Polar Prize organization, and I say, I need to bring Dr. Sarmast down to Gothenburg, because I really wanted to contact you. And he said, of course, and he was so, and I had to say that moment to our students, to connect to your students, play together music, it was a message. It was a peace message, it was a strong message, and I have to say it's these moments where you have to talk with organizations, probably people will not understand the real impact of this moment that they are playing, sitting together. And I have to say it's an incredible impact when kids who are coming from Afghanistan sit next to another Afghanistan students who are in Sweden, from Sweden kids, to understand the importance of freedom, the importance of empowering females, and the importance of preservation of music culture. Because if you don't do what you do, probably with what you mentioned, the Taliban will destroy everything, and it will not be ethnical or historical more things about the music and Afghanistan and the culture. So how important for me was to see that he was coming to Sweden and not to use that opportunity to inspire our students. So
those are Swedish students.
Yeah, we have right now 32 nationalities in the orchestra,
okay,
and mainly refugees.
Okay.
But we have a big number of Afghans.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I remember this contact very well because we didn't know each other. No. I just received an email from him one day that he was representing himself and said, do you consider to come here? And still I didn't know that I'm receiving a Polar Music Prize. I said, yes, let's work on that. And we've been working to make it happen. But the funding was a big issue, how to make it. The visa was a big issue, how to get Afghans, because Even in that time, there was this stigma that Afghans not going to run away, they're going to stay in Sweden, and they're going to be another burden on the government. So all these issues being together trying to overcome, and then there was suddenly I received the Poland Music Prize, and the moment came. And then they invited us next year with the orchestra to come and perform in Sweden. We get back in touch and I said, yeah, we are coming. Let's make it happen. And then we went there, but there's one particular moment in this collaboration. Our kids have been traveling during that time to UK and to Sweden. So for many, many days, they missed Afghan food. But when we went for the first rehearsal before the concert next day, we didn't know that there's Afghan students. We didn't know the entire food on that evening had been called by refugees themselves. And that was the best experience of my life when we went there and saw that the kids from different ethnic backgrounds, their families, they put their efforts together without receiving any financial support from anyone. They put such a big festivity for our group of Afghan, and Iraqi food was in that evening. So that was, music connected us, nothing else.
That's very inspiring. And I think somebody on this side had mentioned the idea of just hearing you speak and what it means for us here in Canada and in Toronto, and just, you know, how fortunate we are in this country, you know, in so many ways. So just it's a real reminder of what's at risk, you know, as with all that you've just been faced with, and just the way that you've gone about it. Very inspiring story. You mentioned earlier the idea, well, food. I mean, yes, 1000%. But what about the art of collaboration in this? Summer, I want to point to you, and just in your experience, if you could speak a little bit about how that's kind of played a role in the preservation of a culture in your work experience.
In collaboration within the groups, or?
Yeah. Sorry, that question didn't come out proper, but if you can talk about the art of collaboration as it applies to some of your work, and how it might link to preserving a culture. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, collaboration and musicking, to use the Christopher Small term, go hand in hand, right? As musicians, we collaborate with each other. Even the act of, if you're a solo musician and you're performing for an audience, there's a reciprocity that exists in terms of on the part of the listener. And so I think that the sheer act of, and I think that's an important point, because in a time and place where we can't assume that all are listening or have a willingness to listen, that is a baseline assumption that I think when we think about the role of music and what we're listening to and who we're listening to, and what that affords us as an opportunity to consider bias, and to reimagine alternative narratives, I think that's really powerful. Specifically in terms of collaboration with youth, to your point of bringing different groups of youth together, but also I've witnessed and participated in so many opportunities with various youth organizations within the West Bank, and more specifically this past summer in Amman, Jordan, where the Palestine National Youth Orchestra came together and brought in musicians from coaches from around the world to work with the students. And it was not only collaboration in the sense that from a mentorship standpoint and working with the students, but the intercultural connections that happened as a result. So it's the generational connections that happen with the elders and young folks, with the upper year students and the next generation that's coming up. And that we were speaking backstage about the importance of representation. And when you're somebody who lives in either an isolated place or a set of circumstances, and for the first time, maybe this is where you're seeing someone who is like you or has a connection to your family heritage or roots, and what that affords as well in terms of a powerful opportunity. So I think that connection and collaboration is, again, it's something that we can't take for granted, and that really has such a powerful impact.
Wait, just to follow up, when you're doing a project like what you had just mentioned, there's I'm assuming many educators in the room. So how do you go about designing that? Like, this is for any of you really, but I want to start with Summer. Is how do you go about designing that thing, the kind of a, the pedagogy around how you're going to bring that thing to life?
Mm-hmm.
Is it organic? Does it come from the players? It comes from the people that you're working with, or?
It's a bit of both. It depends. I can think of a couple of different projects. Certainly in an orchestra, there's a deadline. There's a concert. How do we get to the concert? And there's the components, but there's a lot of collaboration and coordination that goes into thinking thoughtfully about from a programming standpoint. But I recall, it was pre-COVID. I mean, any years pre-COVID just seemed to be, it's like we're pre or we're post. So pre-COVID, we did a project that I think really speaks to your question, where a group of educators from North America, the UK, and New Zealand came to the West Bank, and we created a summer, week-long creative music camp for children, regardless of age, ability, to come together, and we created a production by the end of it. So the students composed, they wrote the stories, that effectively was a musical. And they composed all the music, did the storyboarding, performed, acted, built the sets, etc. And so how did that conversation start? Well, it was very organic in the sense that we had certain structures to it in terms of any story needs a beginning, middle, and end, any process, but really opening the question up to the folks who are in front of us and not presuming that they would necessarily want to only perform a specific type of music. And what came about was this incredible kaleidoscope of musics. There was Western music, there was Middle Eastern music, there was electronicas, they all have phones. We had them go out and capture audio from their day-to-day and bring it back and incorporate it. And so creating that opening for the students to bring their voices in and not presuming to know what those voices would be, and to create that space was really important.
Anyone else? Thanks, Summer.
I would like to take the part of the didactic. For example, when you have to teach in a classroom and you have to observe what kids coming from what culture, what country, and how you prepare, how you plan your class to be able that everybody feel included and also somehow respect about what they come from. And I would just want to share, I remember it was one teacher came once to me and says, Ron, I have this student always is like half toned down, he cannot tune, and then I says, where he from? And they say, well, I think he's from Iraq. And I say, listen, in their ears, they always have quarter tones. They know how to move with mode scales. What you are teaching is completely, for what is normal scale for you is no normal scale for them. So then you have to reevaluate, reflect about how you plan your class. Because you cannot teach, this is the scale. No, this is not the scale. This is one of the scales. Starting from that point, yes. Because it can be drag scale, it can be mode scale, it can be it can be different time, and the same happen with the repertoire that you're working. If you are conducting in 3/4/4/4 or 9/4, if you're conducting, and all of that for some people who born and being lullaby by parents who sing in a type of tone or time of rhythm, that would be the usual, the regular part. So then as a teacher, then you need to really plan your class to see what are the students that you have in front. Okay, I have students from Ukraine. Okay, I have this type of dance that I would like to work. I do in every class that we have, when we have the orchestra, I told them, bring one melody from your own country, and we learn it by ears.
Great.
And that's also, we talk about quarter tones, and we talk about modes, and we talk tonal music and things like that. And I think that didactic part is what makes inclusion. That because the teacher behind me is thinking about how to plan my class to preserve that. At the same time, how to use innovation, how to use technology to preserve that. How you can use elements of the music. I give an example. In Venezuela, and the music that you have, El Sistema, for example, took the old traditional music from Venezuela, start to digitalize to be able to play. And I think it's the same in Afghanistan and different countries that you have to preserve. You really need to go to use technologies to be able to spread that. So I think it's a lot of planning, reflection, and also strategies that make you, as a teacher and inclusive, thinking about everybody have something to bring and how you can understand the code. I think it's different way of code that you have to use in your class.
Yes.
We've got similar situation now that my students are living in Portugal and collaborating with Portuguese musicians, or when our orchestra have been traveling around the world collaborating with musicians from other countries. We noticed also similar situation. The scale was one issue. That's Afghanistan is using the Hindustani tradition, so that's very diverse than the Western scale.
Yes.
But most importantly, one we always, our conductor is noticing, the rhythmic modes. So 7/80s, a very complex rhythmic mode. Our students easily place this one with no difficulties.
Yeah.
It's in their blood. It's considered even the national rhythm of Afghanistan. But when they play 3/4 or 4/4, then they fell into difficulties in one simple stuff, but with the most complex, they like in
Isn't that something?
swimming.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I did a project recently where I didn't speak the language of the people I was collaborating with. And boy, was it eye-opening and beautiful. Just the how to get it across musically. So I really am fascinated by this concept of colliding or mixing
In terms of colliding and mixing, we've got also a very good experience because Western classical music is not very well known in Afghanistan, especially in a country where music was banned for many years.
Right.
So when I established this Afghanistan National Institute of Music and various orchestras, we've been promoting Western classical music. That was one of the major elements of our teaching in the school. But also we've been promoting Western classical music within the community. So how make it that it's accepted by the community, it's understood by the community? What we did, we incorporated Afghan traditional instruments in the makeup of a Western orchestra. We come with the new arrangements. Yeah. We played, for example, Four Seasons of Vivaldi. We called it Four Seasons of Afghanistan. So we incorporated Afghan musical instruments in the arrangement. We come up with a totally new arrangements, but also we kept the original score. Okay. But we added some extra in each session. We also added some Afghan element connected to that program or to that vision. For example, in winter we incorporated a melody which is very closely to winter in Afghanistan. But in this way we made Afghan community to understand that Western music, but at the same time show to the community that, guys, don't run after the Western instrument. It's good, you have the right to learn those instruments, but your instrument has also the ability. So your instrument can sing the same song that the rest of the world sings. So that was the way that we made Western music and Western musical instruments to be appreciated in Afghanistan.
That's so interesting, the idea of, the Western, like celebrating Western music as we talk about preserving culture. You know what I mean? Like it's that's also a fascinating thing, that you're not just performing traditional Afghan, like centered music. You're also expanding the repertoire, therefore I don't know.
Yeah, we've been committed to musical diversity.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you
we
go.
wanted
There
to
you
make sure that Afghans have got
Okay.
right to the variety of music as their basic human rights, not just Afghan.
Thank you. Be
And
thinking.
if I could just,
Go ahead, yeah.
and if I could just add on to that point, I think I noticed the same thing in the projects that I was a part of, and sort of went in wearing the sort of lens that to presume that that the students would only want to perform music from their culture, and was surprised.
Yes.
We were in. It was, I mean, like July in the West Bank in the desert. It's like hotter than hot. And we had to there was a parade, and we were parading through the town. It was a celebration of the history of this town, and everyone was in cultural dress, and it was really beautiful, the connection with food as well. And so I said to, my group of students, I said, okay, so what pieces do we want to play? Like, we'll learn it all. We've got this amount of time. And of course, there's some pieces that were connected to their culture, and then someone puts up their hand and said, I've always wanted to play Louie Louie.
Right.
Thought,
Right.
Really?
Me too.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what and so there again, it's like, if I had just assumed that everyone wanted to do, or that there was just that this is what they wanted to do, or the instruments, and even with some of the students who I've worked with who talked about the resistance that they experienced within their family of wanting to be a musician. Hands up if that's ever happened. I think that's a universal. But I think that what was surprising in her story was that because she wanted to pursue playing classical guitar, and because she didn't want to pursue, and flute, and she didn't want to pursue playing a traditional instrument, that it was then seen to be, there was a cultural clash there with her family, because their expectation was that you have an opportunity to promote and play an Arabic instrument, Eastern music, whatnot. And her comment was, I do want to do that as well, and I want to do this. So it's not an either or. And again, simply by asking the question and not presuming to know the answer, whether because we think we know what's right, or we presume to know, or we've classified people into buckets.
Sure.
That's where the opportunity comes.
I love
to
that
really
idea
learn.
of musical diversity, just all around. So yeah, thanks. That's beautiful.
Can I add?
Please.
I think it's so important also through that point how you adapt your communication skills when you are working as, for example, as a teacher.
Yeah.
I remembered when I came to Greenland for the first time. I didn't speak Greenlandic, and I didn't speak English at that moment, so I only speak Spanish. And I remember to take, 4 planes, 1 helicopter, and then a dog sledding, and then arrive to the village and where I was teaching. It was called Umanak. It's his main heart. And I worked in a children's home. It was an orphanage. It's an orphanage there. Amazing work with drums as Inuit culture and thing. And I was teaching violin, and I remember the best. I have to adapt all my code of language, even in Spanish, to make them connected. So instead of teaching the bow, taking as I could teach in Venezuela, I was telling, a polar bear, I was imagined. So I have to use all the nature to be able to develop the understanding easily. And I do believe that that is the beauty of art of teaching, when you definitely adapt or give this space, empty space, where you can always put the culture, the nature, what the people used to it. Because if I'm coming from Venezuela, and I used to go to Amazon down and see a lot of tree, and I can talk about angel fall and things like that, but they don't experience that. Yes. They experience polar bears, they experience beautiful snow, darkness, lights, northern lines. So how to use these elements to be teaching, and that when you use these elements, then you are preserving their culture. You are preserving the identity. You are connecting with them in a way that you're using your voice as a teacher to be others, because the way that they're going to teach later on, because they are learning from you, is using this as a peer learning. So they will repeat, and then you make that culture continue, because that's many things that you do or you celebrate. Imagine if you celebrate Christmas or Ramadan or whatever you celebrate, you always do by how your parents was doing it. You know, you always try, and you start to add new tradition. Of course, you always, I celebrate now Christmas, and it's not Christmas, it's a little bit Greenland, Swedish, and Venezuela, or Carnival, or whatever other tradition that I celebrate. You adapt it. But it's normally coming from the previous generation. So it's the same with the people who are learning music and music education. So if you are using that elements also in your teaching, then you will secure that this culture preservation will continue.
Let's all give a jazz snap for Ron Alvarez, please. I really enjoyed that point. I thought that was, you hit it on the head. That's why we do this as educators, is to pass that on, to model whatever the musical, tradition that you're trying to, but also the preservation of culture through that at a deeper level. So really beautiful point. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I also would like to add here, I can share my experience back in Afghanistan. When I opened the music school, many students want to learn Western instruments. We introduced the teaching of Afghan instrument to the program, but no one wanted to learn it. But what we did, once we incorporated Afghan traditional instruments in the orchestra, and then when we showed to the kids and to the community that, guys, this instrument is not worse than that instrument. So, and then there was, then in one stage we reached out a stage that no one wanted to learn Western instruments.
There we go. There we go. Love it. Love it. I have a couple more questions. I want you to be, if you're listening to this, I hope you're having a nice time. Please think of questions that you could pose to our wonderful panel here. I just, as I was listening to you speak, and all of us now here, is a bit of a weird question, but a necessity. How important is, you mentioned philanthropy in your talk, how important is just money and funding and getting support for these kind of initiatives to this work that you're doing in preserving culture? Anyone, that goes for anyone, just what your relationship is with funding to make the magic, to make the thing happen and sustain.
I can share my experience, what's happened with my life.
Please, in 3 minutes.
Yeah. Funding is always important. Without this, you can't do anything. So I'm not talking how I raised funding for the establishment of the school, but it's always important. Even today when we are in Europe and everyone thinks that, okay, the Afghanistan National Institute of Music is in Europe, they're so bad off, they don't need anything. But in the last 4 years, we survived 3 individual donations, but still we kept the show going on. So that's significantly important without funding, but also commitment and selflessness, significantly important when you're committed, when you're trying to work in the field of arts and culture against many challenges that you can face. Yes, you have to be ready for that.
Yes. Yeah. Brilliant. Anyone else?
To have an NGO or projects, the bigger issue is always funding. It's no matter how people come and see the concert and people see, and this touched my heart, this is beautiful, but then the next day you have a meeting where you have to look your budget and you say, oh my God, how I gonna really making this work, have an impact? And then we, when we are in front of an organization, then we, of course, we have a team working with us. That's the most important people. And it's so interesting because then you ask for money and then you but we already give you money for that. And then you have to always to think about how to change the whole kind of name idea to get money, and I think this is our issue. What's all the organization probably you're running. If you are not, I think when it's about culture and art, we don't become like a human right, and we should. We should. I remember to have a meeting and talk with an organization who was giving money and they say, Ron, but you are not working with food, or you are not working with hosting house. And I say, yes, but my students have these problems. Yeah, but music can wait. And I say, no, music can't wait. Because we are actually giving a solution for so many problems that you try to fix. So I think we have to be there, strong with our vision ideas that we want to help the community, that we want to support the culture, the heritage. And many people will say, no, I don't have money, and it's okay. But don't give up. It's next meeting, and next meeting, and next meeting. And I feel that, of course, in organization, the sustainability is the most difficult issue.
Is that a big part of your work? I mean, day to day, week to week?
Well, when you have a small team, you have to do it.
Sure.
And then that's how you make things happen.
Yeah,
because
okay.
if you wait for someone to come and you don't have the money to employ that person, of course, later on, then you find a person who help you with the applications and the person who will do the report. And I think the report are so important because help you to evaluate your own organization always. But sometimes the reports are 100 pages you have to do, and then you get the grants. And half of the grant is going just to pay a person to make the report. And then how are you going to really work in preserving culture if you have to give half of the budget to a person who needs to fulfill the report, but you need the money to do the action?
Just really quickly, there's an Italian proverb that says "Tutto il mondo è un paese," which means all the world is a village. And I'm vibing with you all now because it's all the same. That idea of funding to get the job, to get the thing done is I think a universal necessity that we have to just make it happen. It doesn't happen necessarily. It could happen on a low budget, but it still need. I just wanted to acknowledge that. You know.
Yeah, it's always very difficult to get the money. I during my conversation, I said that when I went to Afghanistan, there was many other priorities. Security was, Afghan National Army was a priority, Afghan intelligence was a priority, Afghan army was a priority. But when it was coming to arts and education, it was a luxury for the country. You have to fight for it and to prove that it's not a luxury. It's the most necessity that if you want to move the country in the right direction. But as he put about the hard work of the fundraising, yes, now we are living in exiles. No one imagined that there are moments that I'm not sleeping for nights and nights. When I remember this, we are getting rid of the money, and these kids still did not finish their education. They need someone need to pay for their rent, someone need to pay for their utilities. But how you make sure that they continue to do what's best for the community to make music. So in my experience, in the last 4 years, there were many, many nights that I did not sleep.
Okay.
It's hard, especially when you go to sleep and you know the impact you are doing, and then how are you going to pay the teachers? How are you going to pay the teacher tomorrow? And there's, I think many of us are facing that, and we should work to make that change.
For me personally, when the shortage of funding is coming, it's not about the program, it's about
the kids.
A child, kid, that they're going to lose an opportunity. They will be forced to go to the labor market with no skills and no knowledge.
And I think one of the things that I'd also like to highlight is that increasingly in places of conflict, arts organizations and funding for arts organizations are also being politicized because going back to the very first question, What is it about music? What is it about what all of these groups that we're talking about, what they're doing? They're creating a different narrative to populations who have been stigmatized. And so we know throughout history, there's a historical connection between silencing artists, writers, poets, musicians. And so we see that happening in terms of accessible funding for projects like this. And to go back to your point of the selflessness, it does come down to, and to connect to your point, the village. And I think about last summer during the project in Amman in Jordan, all of the teachers who were there were volunteered of their time, and these were, principal players in the Oslo Philharmonic, in Copenhagen, so you have the selflessness piece, but you also have the commitment to go and to step out and to work in places that are either remote or are dangerous, difficult conditions and whatnot, because the risk of not doing it is another generation of children who are going to be left without. And I think that is a really powerful and important point to remember.
Really short, and the importance of include in your connections and your network resource investigators, people who can write about the works that you do it and understands, and can sociologists, psychologists, people who come and do the researches, because that's helped very much in the applications and the support of developing and give the opportunity to the kids. At the same time, it's really helped the organization to grow, because when you hear an outsider to come interview and understands the ecosystem that happen in the place that we are teaching, is more than a self-reflection. It's a reflection that's coming as a perspective that you probably don't see. So help you to grow, help you in budget-wise when you apply, but at the same time give you better knowledge to become a better organization and give better access to their kids.
Well, I feel very honored to pick all of your brains and get to speak with you. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion so far. We have about 15 minutes left. One last question, then we're going to open it up to you, gentle viewers here. So if you have a question, please just put your hand up in a minute. Social media, the idea of, you had touched on it in one of your responses, Dr. Sarmas, the idea that you heard that song on social media that they had written, and you amplified it. You used those words, right? Has it? How has it played a role in terms of the work that you're doing in preserving culture, or has it hindered in certain aspects? That's my last question for the panel here.
Well, that's what I mentioned about using technology and using the importance for communication nowadays. I mean, there are so many apps, so many things. If that help to give a voice and get strong voice for the works that you do, but also of the culture, if there's kind of like a thing from the 90s is a new concept called artivists, like using artists for giving the possibility for human rights and if you have social media, it's a perfect channel to share. Because, of course, you come to a concert, the coming audience, 2,000 people, 320 people, but then using the technology will help you to, spend it. And as I always say, it's with careful and with respect, That will help you to really increase more listeners and people who understand the matter of the work you do.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Just to say that, and I appreciate that point, always in ways that are respectful and appropriate. I think that's a really, really important point. Thank you. In the simplest of terms, sometimes it's the only way to disseminate. And, I think that again, speaks to the realities on the ground.
For us back in Afghanistan, social media was also to see how the community is responding to our activities. I remember back in 2010 when the school was established, when the news was shared in the media in Afghanistan and then in social media, comments about the news of the opening of the music school, it was 90% negative. Okay. But then as we moved forward and began making an impact and began our international tours, we could see how it changes within the community. And I remember when the Taliban returned back to Afghanistan, I could see that 100% of comments in the closure, about the post of the closure and the forcible flee of our students was positive in terms of solidarity with our group. Yeah. So it also showed us that, for example, when we formed the all-women orchestra of Afghanistan, how highly it was appreciated. And I remember when we returned to Afghanistan from World Economic Forum in Davos in 2017, where the first performance, international performance of the Zohar Orchestra took place. It was the social media that mobilized the community within Afghanistan.
So it helped you build community through... Yeah.
Community, and also when we went to Afghanistan, that's never happened, and that's something that I'm very proud of, how we changed the attitude of the people towards music. When the orchestra returned back to Afghanistan after Davos, a huge bunch of Afghan youths with the flowers meet the orchestra in the airport. Yeah, and it was also thanks to the social media that it was circulated news and the media coverage, but also it showed us that how much appreciating the job that we are doing. So it was a kind of indicator of seeing the attitude of the community towards our job.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you all. Thank you, Ron, Summer, Ahmed. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Thank you. We have, yes, please. Any questions from our wonderful audience? And I don't know how you'd ask it. Do you just verbalize it, or do we throw a microphone? What's the... Oh, you've got a microphone.
Although my mother would say I only have an outside voice.
Well, use it. You're going to have to use it.
Thank you. My name is Heidi Epp. I am the program director for the Pay-Per-View Music Academy, which is an El Sistema program in British Columbia. Thank you. I just want to comment more than question. First, if they're silencing you, it's because they're afraid of you, which speaks to how powerful and meaningful you are, and that the program is. So I want to affirm that for your Afghan. I did get to hear you last night, the orchestra, and I hope to hear them again. It was really wonderful. I think I also have several youth choirs in British Columbia, and I can tell you that they learn 7 to 11 different languages in their repertoire every season. And when you speak about preserving culture and preventing erasure, that's one of my favorite things about what I get to do. Because when I teach that repertoire, I don't just teach the repertoire, I have to teach the history of where it came from. And so I'm teaching history. And what I would always say is our history books tell a narrative, however true or slanted, or they tell what happened. But it's the arts of every nation of the world that tell how it impacted us, how we felt about it, and how we're trying to recover from it. And we're in process. And so when we sing each other's songs, we sing each other's voice, we are heard. So for example, I was touring to Japan, and we sang a piece called The Lullaby of Hiroshima. The kids in the choir didn't even know the story of Hiroshima. They didn't know the history. So now I had to teach the history. And they're like, we can't sing that, that's terrible. And I said, but if you sing their story, you are giving respect and voice to that story. You're saying, I've heard you, and you matter to me. And so that's why okay. We were in 2018, we were in Schwane at World Choir Games. And that was in the summer, but for Remembrance Day the year before, I had taught them a piece called Senzenina, which is from the apartheid of South Africa. Senzenina, and it means, what is our sin? We sang it for Remembrance Day. Now we're in Shwane, and after we'd done the World Choir Games, we were at this museum called the Eugene Peterson Museum. And in this museum, it talks about the children who were protesting the loss of their education during apartheid. And the children, the elementary school children, were singing in the street. Don't really know how a fire started, but nonetheless, military opened fire on the children, and this boy, Eugene, was killed. And there's a picture of his sister carrying his dead body, wailing through the streets. What I didn't know until I was at this museum is that the children were singing Zenzenina as they were protesting. So from there, we go to a big church to see inside. Seats about 3,000 people, and it was a sanctuary and a place of refuge during apartheid. And so I'm talking with the kids in the choir, and I said, based on what we've just learned and seen, maybe, we haven't sung this since November, but maybe we should sing Senzenina as a way of giving voice to what we've experienced and processing. And I asked our host, we were the only ones there, would you mind if we start singing this? Can we sing in here? And she said, yes, absolutely. So we start to sing Senzenina, even though we haven't sung it for how many months. And I see our host, and she's singing very quietly, and tears are rolling down her face. And so I just grab her hand and invite her to come sing with us, and she opens up, and man, is she a soloist. Like, she's a professional soloist. She never told us that until I really heard her sing. But you can't teach that in a history classroom. You could talk about it for weeks and never learn what we learned in that experience. And so I think the fastest way we make friends, the fastest way we connect, the fastest way, the most significant way and connected way is through the arts and through music.
I love that. Thank you.
And I
Thank you.
thought I needed to share that.
Does anyone want to respond to that? You're okay?
I think
it's perfect. That's perfect. No response because it was perfect. Thank you. Anyone else? Very good. Meeting adjourned. No, really, we'll let it breathe for a little bit if anyone, there's got to be another question. I know there is. There in the back, you see? Stand by, stand by.
Hello, thank you for this great panel. I think for me, it's like a little more common living in a city like New York, where you have so many, like here in Toronto, so many cultures. So your responsibility and your duty, or you become like a facilitator. For example, in one of my schools, not necessarily have to be with the music, because sometimes in one side, for example, you see my school is 95% Dominican. There's a minority of Mexicans, some few here and there. So how it was really beautiful to see how kids, in order to be integrated, the kids who speak, who are have Mexican background, try to speak Spanish with Dominican slang and Dominican accent, and try to eat the same food. Normally, it takes time for them to understand that. And on the other side, as musicians, as teachers, how I'm not even from that background. I'm a minority of a minority. I'm Venezuelan, living in that area. So how you facilitate the exposure to kids who come from cultures that they don't even know their roots. For example, they don't even speak Spanish. So how is so very delicate process to expose them to what is their own background, and make them start little by little to be aware of that awareness, if we could say, in the middle of us believing in a context that doesn't have anything to do with them?
I think there are an important points. First one is observation. You have to observe what kids you have. As you mentioned, you already know who are coming from Dominican Republic. Then later, I'm sharing from my personal experience. And then after that, I try, of course, to research about their countries and their culture. But the most important is to create a space, places where you can meet with their parents and have the time of build a relationship and a strong relationship. Because through the relationship, like when you get a friend, you start to know each other. Sure. Then you start to get interesting in what are the things that you like it. As you mentioned, probably there are many kids who don't speak the language because it happened to mainly with the second generation of migrants. They're probably born in Sweden, but their parents are from Bolivia, or their parents are from Syria, or their parents, and they probably don't speak the language at home, or some yes, or some no, and they probably are not having this, this moment of talk about it. Of course, there are families. I'll give you an example. In my home, we live in Sweden, but when you go inside of my house, it's Venezuela. Right. So there are families who, why I say it's Venezuela, because it smells like food Venezuela. We live in the way of decoration or things like that. But there are families who are not like that. Yeah, yeah. So, and then the kids doesn't grow with that feeling of their culture. Yeah. So, but when you create this space where the parents are able to share, or you do the resources to be able to supporting, as I mentioned before in the beginning of the section, we have a book in our website, in dreamorchestra.de, which is free, where we did a project that was first just asking, with a really respect, where are your parents come from? And that's, I tell you, with a lot of respect, because they were parents who didn't want to say where they come from. And then we start to, navigate with respect into that and ask them what music the parents like it. When we meet in Sweden, there are traditions called fika, where the people socialize. And then we have in the orchestra 30 minutes of fika every week. And that is where we start to ask questions. Because when you play music, of course, you share culture things, but you don't have time to ask questions. You ask questions in the orchestra. But in that social moment is where exactly, okay, we know this guy is coming from Bolivia, and things like that. And then we start to, as the lady mentioned, we start to organize the repertoire who is connecting to it, included the history part, including how to offer all these elements will help you. So I think it's creating the safety place to people be open. And when you create that moment, then the things start to develop little by little. You should not force it.
And I would just add to that point that, and you mentioned it as well, relationships. And relationships take time. Yeah. I recently moved back to Toronto from Boston, and there was this wonderful initiative that they started in Boston Public Schools, where they received a really significant grant funding to start steel pan in the schools. Fantastic. One problem. The students were excited, but when they implemented the program, to your point about intricacies within intracultural intricacies, and to the comment, when the forms went home, students seemed interested, they came back, no one wanted to participate, no parental support, because they had missed the point of connecting to the community, only to find out that there were two very different traditions of steel pan within that micro community within the city, and that there were differences of opinion of it and whatnot, and so just the sheer implementation of that great idea without the conversation and investing the time in the relationship resulted in learning opportunities, shall we say.
Yeah, it's all about that. I really want to thank you all. It's all about building trust and getting to know each other, and I feel like we've gotten to know our wonderful panel here. Please put your hands together again for me. And thank you to the Glenn Gould Foundation for pulling this all together. It's been an honor. Thank you.
And thank you to Richard.
Thank you very much.
You guys together. And now we'll stand uncomfortably if you want. No, let's go.